We are live. This is Maya Goode, and I'm here with a really, really special guest. I am here with Vanessa Garcia, and if you've been on my YouTube channel for any length of time, you probably remember that name from when I read her book, White Light, which ended up being one of my favorite books that I've read in the last decade and a half, easy. So here I am with her, and I'm going to try not to fangirl too badly. Vanessa, say hi to everybody.
Hi.
So I'm really excited to talk to you. People that don't know, that haven't followed my Twitter feed, we got to meet up when I was in Miami, and I got to see some of your artwork, and we chatted. I have a question for you.
Okay, I'm ready.
When I tweeted to you, and I was like, "Can I look at some of your artwork?" What'd you think?
I was like, come on over. Honestly, really?
It was gonna be like some crazed fans gonna.
No, it's super funny. Like, I mean, maybe it's crazy, but I mean, I've had people come over and see stuff, and I'm really open in terms of, like showing work and talking about art. So I was like, nah, come on over. Plus, you seem cool.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed looking at your artwork. One of the things that I mentioned on the Literary Roadhouse podcast is that your book was the first time I heard modern art spoken about in a way that non-artists could get it. And, I'm just wondering, how was that for you, mixing the art and your writing and trying to express those emotions through writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think at first, while I was doing the actual writing, when you're not thinking in terms of publication, when you're just thinking about the actual work, it came very naturally, and it felt like I'm just going to create this character that is a painter, and therefore I just simply use the language that I know. You know what I mean? And so that was really sort of swift and easy to do. What became a little more complicated, or at least interesting in a different way, was later when the cover became my artwork, which wasn't my choice. But I'm happy with it now. But that idea of mixing my person, or artistic persona, with the character of Veronica Gonzalez, especially since I'm Vanessa Garcia, was like there was all this doubling, and a lot of people asking whether I was her. And I just, at the end, like in the end game of all this, I thought it was a pretty fun play and fun game to play. But there was a moment where I was like, oh, do I really want to, like, where do I want to blur these lines? Where, so there were a bunch of questions that came up when it actually went out into the world versus when I was making it. When I was making it, I was just like completely true to the character of Veronica, which is not me. It just happens to have some of the language that I know,
Yeah, I think that's really common. I mean, honestly, one of the first things people ask you when they read something of yours is this real? Did this really happen? And I don't know where that comes from. The idea that, this is fiction and this is real life. Like, even now I'm traveling and I'm hearing all these stories, and when I write short stories, they may have elements of things I've heard or seen, but I'm not going to sit down and write a biography because I'm a fiction author.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we draw upon the world in which we live, So definitely that world is all around us and in our books and in our writing and what we put out there. But they are fiction, It's interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting. Have you ever thought about writing nonfiction?
Yeah, I write nonfiction all the time. I mean, my PhD is in nonfiction.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and I probably spend half the day writing nonfiction. So I usually use the mornings for fiction, and the rest of the day is journalism, nonfiction, essay based. So I do all the time, and it's a different animal. I have a very clear journalistic ethic of, when you're writing nonfiction, you stick to the facts. That doesn't mean that you can't be literary in your language, but it's different.
Yeah. How do you find making that switch, since you, like, I have a hard time. I tried for a while doing the whole write new words in the morning, edit old words at night kind of thing.
Yeah.
How do you make that switch from fiction to nonfiction?
For me, it's easier to deal with fiction or like get into the world of fiction when I've just woken up. I'm super, super clear-headed, but I'm also at the same time kind of like I wake up early, so
Hmm.
it feels like this moment where the world hasn't totally played in yet, and I can create worlds. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I find it easier to do that in that space of quiet, whereas when I'm dealing with the real world, I feel like, okay, well, I'm already in the real world. You know, it's after 9. There's people around. I'm getting phone calls and emails and all this stuff, and so I can deal with it a little bit better, or it just seems to fit for me better to deal like in terms of dealing with that and nonfiction in the afternoon. Unless I'm on deadline for something important nonfiction, then I do it in the morning.
Yeah. That's interesting. So, do you think, I know you have several degrees because you're an amazing person. And if you weren't so nice, I would hate you. Just put that
Okay.
out there. So, I'm wondering, when I talk to most artists, they are not nearly as disciplined as you are. You have the discipline of like Bushido code. So, I'm wondering do you think that going to graduate school and studying art, nonfiction graduate school, do you think that helped you cultivate this level of discipline to be able to do, like, have your hand in a lot of different pots?
Yeah, it's funny. I almost feel like it was the time before and after graduate school that reinforced the discipline,
Okay.
because I feel like when you're freelancing full time, I very rarely had 9 to 5 jobs because I'm very bad at them. And
Yeah.
I always decided that like, okay, if I'm gonna be a writer, then my work has to revolve around the thing that I do. And even if it was harder and it was always like this, hustle, I felt that that was the best place for me. And so to do that successfully and actually, like eat and have shelter while you are
Oh,
doing it.
come on. You don't need that much shelter.
That's true. I mean, you're proving that is true. You're right. Yeah.
But I totally know what you mean. I just started freelancing this last year and it's been almost 2 years, but I can't count all of that because I was lazy. So I'm sitting here, it's a whole new skill set, the level of discipline required, trying to get clients, trying to do the work when I'm scattered or if I'm going through a bad week or whatever. It's really hard.
Yeah.
It can be really, really hard. And at the other time, I'm like, well, do I really want a real job?
Right.
Do I really want to go into an office 5 hours a day and sell something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Been there, done that. Not really that exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's choices, right? And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, if I did want to go, whatever, into advertising or into something that I know would be like a hefty paying day job and then write on the side, there are plenty of people that practice law and write, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But it's just
definitely.
not who I am. I can't do it.
Yeah. I actually considered advertising for a while because I find it fascinating and I would be good at it. But I just, my soul can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a lot of spiritual stuff going on and I'm just like, right action. Can't, like, I would be at the mercy of my boss. And if I'm told to make an amazing manipulative ad for something I don't believe in, then I'd be stuck doing it. So I chose not to, but at the same time, it's one of the few things that when I look at it, I'm like, in another lifetime, I would have been an advertising person.
Yeah.
Because it's just so fascinating.
Yeah. I mean,
mixture of art and sales,
Totally. One of the cool things about freelancing is that every once in a while, if you want to, I mean, I've done this. I'm like, okay, well, let me pick up an ad gig. You know what I mean? Which I have done. And it's fun sometimes. Yeah,
Sometimes.
exactly. Which is why I know it's not for me every day in the office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
So you paint.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some photographs. I don't know if you do photography, but you dabbled at least a little bit. You write. Did I cover everything?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like we were talking right before. You're out there taking pictures and writing. I think things things merge.
Yeah, I knew that there was a reason why we get along so well.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I feel totally comfortable talking to you. So my question to you is, when did you start writing? And how did you make that decision to focus on one art versus the other?
Yeah. I started writing early. I started writing and painting really like young. Like it was always in the house. My grandfather was like his family makes tapestries in Spain, and so it was like always part of.
Oh.
Yeah, they ended up actually repairing a bunch of the tapestries in their town that were destroyed by the Civil War.
Wow.
I know, very cool. And so it was always kind of like in the family. Not my parents per se, because I feel like they got the brunt of the immigrant work that had to be done,
Yeah.
in this country as newbies. But in the house and in the family, it was very much in the air. And so like I always wrote and I always painted. And then at some point, and like different genres came up in different moments. Like in New York, I lived around a lot of actors and directors, and so I started writing plays, and I started writing plays a lot. And so like I think it always depends on the people that are around you and like what, I don't know, what form something feels like it would take best.
Yeah.
And then painting, I always did it, but painting is expensive. And there was also, there was a moment where I had to make a decision of whether I wanted to like keep putting in all this money, and also lugging things around, because when you're writing something, it's on your laptop, it's in a file, you can email it to yourself, you can travel wherever you want.
Yep.
And
I've written on my cell phone with an external keyboard before.
Exactly. And you know who it is. I mean, anywhere you are, you can pick up, a piece of paper or whatever if you have it around. If not, you, like you said, on your phone. Like I've got a little notes on my phones, all. So it was. I feel like I wanted freedom, and interestingly enough, the visual work was restricting that. Yeah, because it was like I couldn't carry it, and I almost feel like that is. Like that's also making my actual visual work change. Like now it's finding a way to be as mobile.
I noticed it's getting smaller.
Yeah.
And it's also more textured.
Mm-hmm.
When I was looking at your work, your older work, you were working on really big canvases, big pieces of paper. And then I looked at this, I want to call it a painting because it's square and it's small, but it's not really a painting. I was looking at this 3D architectural thing, and it was much smaller, and the colors were very intense in smaller areas, whereas your painting was like big splashes of color. It was a very interesting to see your older work and be able to see a little bit of that progression.
Yeah, and I also feel like I'm like I just bought a particular tablet that's not going to arrive until October, so I wonder how that will change the visual work. Do you know what I mean? Like everything that you add to and take away from in terms of tools changes your vocabulary and therefore changes the work and the way that you communicate and all that stuff. So I'm excited to see where this goes. But
well, what you just said there, to bring it back to the writing, I could, when I read White Light, I don't know if you've listened to Literary Roadhouse ever, but we tend to tear stuff apart, and we start kind of big and then we drill down smaller and smaller and smaller. That was the whole like idea of the show. Sometimes we're more successful than others. Sometimes we end up in a laughing fit, but it happens. And one of the things I noticed as I was drilling down, and one of the things I liked the most about your book, was there were certain parts of the book where I could hear your poetry background coming out. Not that it was written like poetry, but the sentence level attention to rhythm and detail, word by word detail, is something that I've only seen really in novelists who are also poets. And that was really distinct. And then the other thing you said was about, you were talking about every time you bring in a new tool. And when I heard you talk about, doing screenplays, one of the things I've thought about doing, doing plays, was one of the things I thought about doing is making an outline as a screenplay and then writing a novel from that outline. Because my the work in progress, the first one, is that messy. I kind of just need to start over, just like start from scratch. And I was thinking, well, maybe if I make a screenplay of it like it's a movie and then write the book, as if that's the outline. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, even that, like things that I'm thinking about right now that are really similar to what you were saying, I was like just jotting it down so I remember to say it, but is that I've been thinking about, someone told me, and this changed my brain in terms of writing, just write the scenes you want to write. And I was like, oh, yeah, of course, that's what you do. And if you think about it like that, like this book of moments and the scenes you want to write, you never have that like
the crappy scene that nobody wants to read.
Yes, the one that you think is supposed to be joining these two scenes because it has to be there. It usually doesn't have to be there.
No. The reason why you don't want to write it is because nobody else wants to read it.
I know.
I don't know who said that either, but I remember hearing someone really famous saying that.
Yeah.
You know, if you're bored writing something, guess what? Whoever's reading it's going to be bored reading it.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself using, your playwriting experience in your novel?
Yeah, it's funny because what I'm writing right now, I'm writing a novel, but I just came off of writing a play, and I was completely in, dialogue world, but the play itself had tons of visual elements, and the scene directions were very sort of like poetic. You know what I
mean? Yeah. Sorry.
I was like, oh, is that an ice cream truck?
No, it's a clock tower.
Oh, cool.
It's a clock tower, but it goes really quickly. In my old town when I was a kid, if it was 10 o'clock, then it rang 10 times. And so you'd be still sitting here 15 minutes later waiting for the clock tower to stop ringing. This one, it just does it once and gets it over with. I kind of appreciate it.
It's kind of a nice sound too. I liked it.
Yeah, I think it's, the tone is Big Ben. It's one of the first songs I learned how to play on the piano as a 5-year-old.
Oh my God.
Was the clock tower sound, and I think it's from Big Ben.
Yeah. Cool.
Sorry about that.
No. I was just, it's funny because in the play that I'm talking about right now, there's a clock shop. So it's
really?
Funny.
That is really
clock talk. But yeah, the plays have stage directions that are like the novel, and the novel has dialogue that are like the plays, and it just depends what you're writing that has either more interiority or not, because you can't really write interiority in a play unless someone says it or you see it in their actions. So that's really interesting to play with, though, when you get back to the novel. You know what I mean? Because then you have to be very specific about why do you want to see inside this person's head, why that person's head and not the other one, and who's, so all those questions I think are really cool when you switch mediums.
Yeah. Do you ever write short stories?
Yes, I find them very hard, but I've been working on the same set of short stories since like, I don't know, 2007. So, I find them very slow going.
Yeah. I think only writers realize that.
Yeah.
Like you talk to non-writers, like, oh, short stories must be so much easier to write.
No.
There's like, no, it's so much harder. And I remember an interview by Stephen King where he said that short stories is the pinnacle of good writing. So kind of like in essence, the best short story will always be better than the best novel.
Yeah.
Because it's just the artistic level required in order to sustain it. Short stories are tough.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, and when you're thinking in terms, it's interesting because when you're thinking of the short story itself, it's that world. But then also when you're thinking in terms of a collection, like why you're putting these stories together, that's also another thing that you're taking into account. You know what I mean? Because why are you putting this story next to this story? Why is this world, bunched together or not? Maybe it's just a short story that lives by itself. So,
yeah, I've been working on a series of short stories based on the idea that the innocence of children is lost on the children, and it was so slow going, and I was so frustrated, and I started sending them out to journals or whatnot, and at one point I just wanted them done, and I realized that I was holding myself back, and so I just self-published the 4 that were done. It was just like I need to not look at these.
Yeah.
not think about them and write a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with these messed up children.
Yes, I get it.
Sometimes you're just like, I need this character to be over.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally
How
get
long
it.
did it take you to write White Light? I know that you worked on it in school, right?
Yeah, it was my my MFA thesis. So I wrote it from 2007 to 2009, and then I revised it in 2010, and I submitted it, and it got rejected like left and right all over the place. And then I left it for a while and started to work on other things. And one of the agents that told me, I was working with an agent at the time, and she said, "Look, the rejections I'm getting are, who is this person?" Like, yeah, which was really interesting to me. So I left the book for a while, and she suggested, you know, like, just go get some bylines, put your work out there, you know, like, write the things you want to write, but write them shorter and put them out.
So they weren't willing to take the risk because you didn't have a name?
Yeah, they didn't know.
Or a platform?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's frustrating.
And then the other thing that they said, that they kept saying was, or the agent said, you know, maybe try a small press first, and then, so I thought, okay, I put it away. I didn't even think about the small press thing for a while. I just, you know, sent out, I just started to publish articles, you know,
Yeah.
and at the same time I finished, I was finishing my PhD. So all that was happening at the same time. I put the novel aside, and then I saw this call from Shade Mountain Press looking for female writers writing literary fiction. I just loved the ethos behind this press, and I wrote just a heartfelt cover letter, which I know, you know, usually they're very professional and very whatever, and I just wrote a very honest cover letter to this publisher, and she was like, "Who do I have to fight to buy this book?" And I was like, "Nobody." You know, like, there is nobody.
Which is disappointing to me because, like, quite frankly, was your book published overseas?
No.
Because I remember on the podcast, okay, not to make you blush, but on the podcast, I was like, this book couldn't have been published overseas because otherwise it would have been on the long list. It's that good. We read multiple books on the long list that were not as good.
Oh, that's very nice.
I was like, why is this not over here? How come I haven't heard of this? Why isn't it on a bunch of awards lists? It made no sense. So it's disappointing to me to hear that because it is such a good book.
Oh, thank you.
Basic good book, and to think all these people were rejecting it just because you didn't have a platform, they didn't know who you are, it's just kind of heartbreaking as a writer. I'm like, oh well, then I'm really screwed.
But I think, you know, sometimes it doesn't, it definitely happened for me that way, but I think, you know, every story is its own story. You know what I mean?
The fact is, you kept an eye out. You kept sending it out. I think that is a really good takeaway for people. Because, you know, a lot of writers are probably going to be watching this, and that is a huge takeaway. You were rejected a bunch of times. You set it aside, but you still kept your eye out.
Yeah.
So what were you doing when you were just letting the book sit? Were you primarily just working on your degrees, or were you also working on other artistic stuff too?
I did a lot of stuff artistically. Basically, I was working on a couple of plays, one of which got produced and got a show and all that stuff. So there was that going on, which was great. And then there were a bunch of shorts that happened in theater that also went out. And then that short story collection that I've been working on since 2007, I continued to play with it. Still going, and then I wrote my dissertation, which was creative nonfiction. So there was a lot of stuff going on. So it did not feel at all like it was like a you know, it was just something that I put aside and then came back to in terms of publication, not necessarily revision, because by the time I gave it to the publisher was like, this is in really, really good shape. And obviously we were at that point looking at really, like, we argued over commas and like went back and forth on, you know, like rhythm or certain things, facts, timeline issues, things like that. You know what I mean? At that point. And then also copyright, because it has images in the book. So that was a journey.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Those are not cheap pictures either to put in that book.
No, and it's so interesting, like, who is expensive and who isn't, you know? Like, we have a Matisse and Picasso in here that wasn't that bad. It was like, okay, we could totally do this as a small press. That's great. The publisher was like, yeah, we'll do it. And but then, of course, like, there was half of a sentence. It was like 4 words from a Beatles song, and it was like, no, unless you want to spend like 10 grand. Yeah.
Not even like a whole sentence.
No, it was crazy. So we were like, all right, no
Beatles song for you.
No lyrics. No Beatles lyrics. There's certain musicians that, yeah. Copyright's way too expensive. Understandably, they've earned their.
One of the questions I've had for you since I read the book, one of the things I noticed in the structure of the book is the first part of the book, it really doesn't have like chapter breaks, scene breaks. It's much more of a slow, just unfolding of things that happen. The second part, the sections are numbered. Again, not really chapters, but the numbers seem to increase the tension. And then the last part is really broken up in colors, and it has all these paintings. And did you right away, or is that something that you worked your way into that structure?
Yeah, I was obsessed with having this book take the structure of the painting that the character was making. So, but it also needed to make sense in the narrative. And so from the beginning, I knew that I wanted this to be a kind of triptych because she's making a triptych. But
first, before you go on, can you define that for people that don't know what that is?
So a painting or a work of art in 3 parts. So a lot of, pieces in cathedrals, religious work is in triptych a lot. And it also had that element in it. There's a lot of sort of spiritual, religious, like, backdrop to some of this stuff that's going on in the book. And so I knew that I wanted that in there, but coming into the specifics of it, like the fact that the beginning is exactly like you said, like this thing that's sort of ambling, because I feel like there's this character who's like trying to make it and find themselves, and so it doesn't have this like defined particular structure that's, it's not imposed on it. But the second one takes place in a hospital, almost the entire thing, and I wanted it to be like a heartbeat, like a heartbeat that was gonna crash at the end, and disappear. And so that kind of rhythm, I needed it to be numerical, like 1, 2, 3, and then at the end, it's like what happens when you come out of mourning, and what happens when you're making something and you start building these little pieces of life back again. And she's also making the painting that she's making, and so it's the color comes back in. Then it all plays in at the end in terms of what white light is. But yeah, so it's a combination of this idea that I had from the beginning in terms of an overarching structure, but then making that actually really precise once I knew where it was going.
And that's one of the things that was fascinating for me to see done as a writer, because, I work with a lot of indie authors. I read a lot of writing books, and usually when you hear about like structure, I mean, you hear hero's journey, obviously, like that's the most basic, but to actually play with it, to change it for different effects was something I hadn't actually considered. As a poet, I think about line breaks that way. I don't know why I didn't think about novel structure that way. And reading your book, and one of the things that struck me was in the third part, the colors are different colors, and then gradually the colors start to come back, start to repeat. And it reminded me of when my mom died, and you have memories and they start to go away and you start to live your life, and then every once in a while it'll pop back and you're just like blindsided by this whatever. And it was very effective. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you, this book has been really well received. Okay, you have plays, you've done poetry and painting, but this book has really, really been very well received. I'm wondering how that is making you feel as you start writing your next book.
I don't think about it.
On purpose or on accident?
On purpose, because I feel like the second book, the novel that I'm writing right now has something in common with the first book, but it's a totally different world. and I don't want to be hindered or pushed in any particular direction. And so I've like completely at this point been like, okay, that was something that's over there. Move on, get into this world. In fact, like, it's funny when a book comes out, you're constantly out there like trying, to promote it basically, and you're doing all the things that you've, set out to do with your publisher and your editor and whatever. And you go out and you do all this stuff and you feel like you're constantly talk, and you're not as much in that like writing space. And so recently I've come back to the writing space and it's so quiet, to the point that you think like, oh, are the people still out there? So
like, does this make you feel weird?
No, it's kind of nice actually now, because it's like, I haven't done this in a minute. It's kind of nice to be like, let's talk about writing. Yeah. But you're in a moment of like really talking to a lot of people right now, which is also really great.
It's been pretty crazy. This is going to be going up on my BookTube YouTube channel. So people may not know, if they don't also follow my Quotidian Light channel, that I am currently hitchhiking all over the place. So I hitchhiked from Austin, Texas to South Beach, Florida. That's how I met you. And then I hitchhiked up to where I'm at right now. Right now I am in, where am I? Savannah. I'm like SV. There's letters in between. What's in between the S and the V? Like literally, that's the thoughts that was going through my head. So I'm in Savannah, Georgia, and then I'm gonna go to South Carolina, North Carolina, and I have no idea where I'm going after that. So yeah, in hitchhiking, I think I mentioned this to you before. Every time I get in a car, that is their safe space, and they know they're never going to see me again. So the entire way out here, I have heard story after story after story, and there hasn't been one car I've gotten into that didn't have a story.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's what's amazing. The other thing that's amazing is hitchhiking changes by the culture of the community you're in. So when I was hitchhiking, when I hitchhiked to Miami, it was quick. I think I only had like 4 rides, maybe 5 tops. It was super fast all the way from Austin, Texas. No problem getting rides. Hitchhiking out of Miami, on the other hand, nobody wanted to give me a ride. And what was interesting is the few people that did give me rides, they were either had someone in their family or had themselves hitchhiked, usually in Europe, or they had a dad that hitchhiked in the 60s, or they were first generation, maybe second generation immigrants.
Okay.
Nobody else would give me a ride. Then in other communities, it's the truck drivers that will give you a ride, or it's the young people. On the way to Miami, I only got 1 ride from an older person. It was young people, college age to maybe 30, who were just curious. And I thought that was really interesting. And so as I go from community to community, it kind of, I'm noticing patterns in who picks me up based on where I'm at. So I'm like totally overwhelmed and just blah. My brain is just totally blah right now. The end thing is I'm different. I'm a different person than I was when I started.
Yeah.
And that's something I wasn't expecting. My dedication to Buddhism is way stronger than it was. That was unexpected. My minimalism is stronger than it was. That was unexpected. So I'm excited about what's going to happen with my writing.
Yeah. I mean,
because I can see how this has changed everything else.
Yeah. And you're like receiving all this stuff right now, what that does.
So many stories.
Yeah. Even just structure, even just like the way people speak and how different people speak, and the way people tell a story, that changes the way that you think and create narrative, And
it is interesting you mentioned that because, I had mentioned earlier the hero's journey, that being like the basic story structure. You ask a 5-year-old, tell me your day. And essentially what comes out of their mouth is a little miniature hero's journey. Yeah. But when you're in people's cars and you listen to them talk about their lives and their stories, you're right. There's a lot of structures we use. And people do tell stories very, very differently. Sometimes they're halting. Sometimes they're flowing. All of those are things that I know are going to show up in my stories as far as like how people communicate with each other and talk and the rhythms they use.
Yeah.
it's all gold. It is
Yeah.
all gold at this point. Yeah.
Very cool.
I have a feeling in 20 years it's going to be like, so what was the biggest thing that impacted your writing? I have a feeling it's going to be The Hitchhiker.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know where I heard this, but you know that they say that the most, if you really want to have an intense and real and true conversation with someone, they happen in particular moments, like when you're walking next to someone, when you're driving, when you're fishing. And
you're looking forward.
Exactly,
it's parallel
we're talking about this. Yeah, and it's like you're looking forward, and they are looking forward, and you're not looking at each other. Yeah, exactly.
Because then you're not seeing a reflection or their judgments or their ideas of what you're saying, and you're able to go deeper. And I think that is, as writers, we frequently talk about eavesdropping.
Yeah.
We sit in cafes and we write down notes and we peer at people out of the corners of our eyes. But getting out and talking to people is really scary. Like our city, and putting myself in situations where I'm forced to do that.
Yep.
And then having the repayment be all these experiences and stories and knowledge of just the nature of humanity.
Yes.
To be able to use in my writing, it's huge. It was a huge risk, though. I don't think if someone had told me to do this last year, I could have done it.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, just as people are telling you their stories, you're like, it's scary also to go into another person's life momentarily and then leave. Yeah.
I had an amazing ride the other night. Young kid, 19 or 20. And he was here from Mexico, and his visa had ran out a little bit, so he was trying to be a little careful.
Yeah.
And he was going all the way up to New York to see this girl that he'd been talking to online for 2 years.
Oh my God.
And it was their first meeting.
Oh my God. Wow.
It was the sweetest thing ever. His nerves, and when he talked to her, how he drove changed. All these little signposts that told me just how important this was to him. And you could tell that he was driving himself crazy. What's gonna happen if we don't like each other?
That's so cute. Yeah.
It was wonderful, and to be picked up by an ex-soldier from Eritrea, to be picked up by a teacher of the deaf. Like literally every single person has had a story, and it took me a couple times, and then I'm like, oh crap, I gotta start writing down notes at least so that I can jog my memory, because this is amazing, and then it's just so much all at once.
Yeah.
When it comes to your writing, what would you say has affected your writing the most? Was it school? Was it an event?
Oh my gosh. I think right now, even just the idea that my parents are Cuban and that the stories that I have as a result of that, the stories that I have a link to where I'm from and why that matters in the world, particularly now, I think is huge for me,
Yeah.
But also, I am huge on traveling, and I really do think that going outside of the spaces that you're comfortable in and going out in the world is hugely important. It has been for me, definitely. And also, living different places. So visiting places in short periods of time, but also staying a little longer in others. I think that kind of shift is interesting. Even, at this point, I'm basically saying everything, but even after I got divorced, I'm in my second marriage now, but after my first marriage, I went on this dating binge, and that was fascinating because it was every time, if you look at it, instead of saying, oh my God, complaining about all the things that are reasonable to complain about in terms of dating, if you look at it in terms of I'm speaking to another human being right now, intaking their life, because they're trying to tell you who they are. You know what I mean? Never are you so quickly given an idea of who a person thinks they are so quickly. You know what I mean? And then, you know, trying to unravel who you actually think maybe they actually are, and is that the same thing? It's just really interesting. So, you know, I think my background definitely, but just this like curiosity about the world in general, it really helps in terms of being a writer. Yeah, helps you to be a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. And I think your curiosity shows not only in the amount of different mediums and techniques and things that you explore, but also all your degrees. You know, you work really hard. You know, do you think your formal education affected your creative writing in a positive way?
Yeah, I mean, what it did was my formal education made me an extremely, I think, intense critical thinker.
Okay.
And so I think when you're dealing with character, for example, I think that's a very good skill to have, because you're not just building a flat, you know, surface. And the more you get into what critical thinking is and why, and the why of everything and how, it's like, at least I know with my plays, I create a lot about the character that may never show itself literally, you know, in words, but I think it's there in action and in the person, because, you know, I've created this like book of the character, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
I do the same thing. It's
yeah.
when I was in high school, I did a lot of acting and method acting. And I actually end up doing a lot of method acting exercises for my characters that I write about.
Yeah, I think that's...
And it totally looks insane. Like, I will talk to myself in the shower. I will do monologues in the car, the whole 9 yards, their mannerisms, just to get a feel of to be them. And I think even if none of that ends up in my story, you still, you're right, you see little peaks of it where it pops up a little bit here and a little bit there, and it makes them feel more real.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And I think that's, I mean, method acting is one of those things, you know, it makes you go deeply into the person. So, yeah.
That's a kind way of saying it makes you a little logo, a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Yeah. Where does the character end? It's kind of like when we started, where does the character end and I begin? And vice versa.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you've seen people doing method acting exercises up close and personal, and yeah, people can get a little interesting when they're deep in character.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like being deep in yoga, you know, like all of a sudden you're crying and you don't know why.
Yeah, that happens in Zazen as well. You'll see every once in a while, if you're at a temple, you'll see someone that has to leave in the middle of meditation because just you go deep enough and all this stuff starts to bubble up, you know? It's amazing. It's absolutely fascinating. So we have been talking for an hour.
Oh my God. Okay. Wow. Amazing.
I know, right? You are so easy to talk to. And I want to collect you. I need more friends in my life. And so I'm just going to collect you. I'm not even going to ask. You're one of them now. So before I let you go, I have to ask you, is there anything, you know, considering how many writers are going to be watching this video, is there anything that you would want to say to somebody that's maybe working on their first or second novel that's still like in the trenches of feeling like I can do this?
Yeah, you know, I got today an email from a high schooler. So it's interesting because I know, and she wanted to send me some poetry, and I thought, go do it, and she sent it to me, and then I responded to it very, you know, like from my heart in certain moments of the piece. I didn't give any criticism or at all. It was just like, this is amazing.
Much nicer than
me. But she didn't need it then. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like sometimes, so like, right. And then she sent me another one. And I feel like she's going to keep sending me stuff. And so I think that the best thing to do, really, honestly and truly, is to keep writing these things and to find the people that you can do that with. You know, that you can say, do you want to read this? Do you want to talk with me for an hour about this? Do you want to, like, you know, because we get stuck in these things where we think, you know, oh, I have this brilliant idea. I actually think it's brilliant. I think I have this grace moment. And then you sit down to write and you're full of doubt and you have so much doubt, and then so many people reject it because they're having a bad day and it's not the right moment and it's not, you know, the time. And I would just, you know, just keep writing. That's the best thing I could say.
And that is the best thing that they could have heard. Like, seriously, excellent. It's been wonderful talking to you, Vanessa.
You too.
And on that, I just want to let everybody know, Vanessa Garcia, she wrote White Light. I highly recommend you read it. If you actually don't watch my review. It's totally full of spoilers. Forget about my review. Just go buy the book. And if you're broke, go to the library and get the book. Just go and get it and then watch my review so I don't spoil it for you. And where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Well, my website, which is my name, vanessagarcia.org. My books are on Amazon, bookstores. There's a Kindle version for those that want to travel around and not carry heavy books. So yeah, I'm easily accessible. My email is on my website, and you know, I like to chat.
Okay, you don't go anywhere. And to all my listeners,